Hi everyone, number one Marmaduke fan here. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but a theme I've wanted for this channel is to encourage people to make art and tell stories. And one thing I'd like to do towards that end is tell you some of my ideas for stories, but tell you ideas for stories that I am never going to use, and therefore I release these to the public domain. If you are bored and looking for a story project or an art project or a comic project, stories in this series are up for grabs. If you hear something and you like it and you want to put your twist on it or add your own characters or change it up, go for it. But I want to describe things that I've come up with that I don't ever see myself sitting down and writing a novel or making a graphic novel about these ideas. This one came to me yesterday, ironically enough, because I watched a dumb cartoon while babysitting about Pac-Man, and I was kind of fuming over how stupid it was, and I was thinking, gee, what if you could go back in time to early Pac-Man days, knowing everything you know now about gaming? Could you make $1 million with the Pac-Man property, knowing that what the future of gaming would be? And then I stopped and said, wait a second, what if it wasn't gaming? What would the economic impact of time travel be? And once I got started thinking about that, I had this great premise for a time travel story. But it's not enough just to have time travel to make an interesting story. You have to have some interesting characters and something interesting happen. So the basic pitch for this world idea, this sci-fi idea, is what if we invented time travel? We could do everything we want with it, but time travel was completely boring. So because the government would essentially control it, and the government would be completely fearful that if we mess around with time travel, we'll ruin the world. And so they hyper-regulate it. So the part of the problem is I've got to describe enough how time travel works in my fictional world, and then describe the characters for you. So I'll start with the characters. So first we have the inventor of time travel, and he's sort of a Doc, what's the Doc's name in Back to the Future? Doc Marty, but maybe a little bit like Rick from Rick and Morty. I've seen exactly 2 episodes of Rick and Morty, but the idea of sort of that hyper brilliant, completely knowledgeable character, but not a toxic jerk like Rick from that show. He's a bit more like a Scrooge McDuck type of character. He likes to go on adventures. He likes to be brilliant. He likes to invent stuff and discover things and make millions and billions of dollars. So he is the inventor of time travel, and he is the top 1% of the top 1% of the top 1% of intellects in the world. He is the only one who even understands how it works, and he can't even explain it to other geniuses, the sophistication of how it works. He can teach whole classes on advanced physics, but very few people on planet Earth can even wrap their head around what the theory is supposed to be, let alone how to achieve it. And the way he's figured out time travel is he could do anything he wants, anywhere, at any time, in any place, without consequence. Now, the thing about time travel stories is you can play around with the explanation or the laws of time travel in that world, so that's all up for you to mess around. Let me tell you how I'm thinking about it. So in this story, there are multiple universes, and there are infinite universes. So he would just like to go from universe to universe, exploring all the alien life and alternate timelines he possibly can. He's a person who is obsessed with learning and obsessed with discovery. But after he discovered time travel, the government came down hard and fast on him and hyper-regulates the use of time travel for very specific purposes. At first, they used it for sort of their shadowy, deep state kind of affairs, and then the economic they started to realize the economic implications of time travel, and it's reached the point where the public is aware that time travel exists, but only the United States government controls it. It's like having nuclear power. John Doe can't have nuclear power. The U.S. obsessively controls this with mounds of paperwork. So within the brilliant doctor's laboratory, he has assistants who are all brilliant, but can barely even understand his brilliance. So assistant number 1, let's make her a girl. And I need to come up with names for some of these characters. Oh, I thought of the name Dr. Augustine for the doctor who discovers time travel, because Augustine is sort of like a central figure in church history who kind of dwarfs everyone who comes after him. So it'd be kind of like a nice it'd be a nice symbolic name just to illustrate Dr. Augustine's significance in the field of time travel. So he has an assistant who, I don't know, we'll call her Dr. Cortana, because she pretty much take Cortana or what's her name, Dr. Layton or something from the Halo series, and you have a picture of her in your mind. She's kind of brilliant. She's kind of ruthless. She's kind of a go-getter. And what's happened is she is sort of degraded in her hope. She started out as very ambitious and hoping to be a great discoverer, and she's sort of degraded to a pencil pusher on behalf of the government. She is a brilliant scientist, but mostly what she does is she arranges paperwork for people who want to engage in multi-billion, multi-trillion dollar time travel business endeavors. And she does a little stuff on the side, like she'll have a tip jar, and if you give her a $10,000 tip, she'll help you facilitate the paperwork a little bit. All legal, because she's brilliant. She knows exactly how to navigate all of the government's mounds and reams of paperwork. But she obeys the letter of the law without obeying the spirit of the law. She knows how to do it legally, but she is doing side business to allow certain wealthy patrons to use time travel to their advantage. And then the main character would be a young man who comes into the lab under Dr. Cortana, and he's very idealistic, and he wants to help people. He wants to be a good doctor. He wants to make discoveries and improve the world and make the world a better place. And then he kind of comes into the lab with all these great expectations, and then he's kind of disappointed because Dr. Augustine is bitter over his discovery being robbed from him. And Dr. Augustine spends a lot of time hidden away in his lab, furious. Because Dr. Augustine is so brilliant and so devoted, he's sort of a Sherlock Holmes type of character. He spends all day discovering stuff. So he's cured cancer. He's remade the internet and made it better. He's figured out virtual reality. He's figured out every single technological problem you could imagine, essentially in his spare time. But he's still frustrated that his greatest invention, manipulation of time, has been robbed from him, and he's sullen and hidden away because of that. He's been robbed of his individualism and his spirit of adventure. So our young brilliant man, I don't know, let's call him Peter Parker, just to give you a cartoon idea of what this character might be like. So Peter Parker comes into the lab. He's really eager to go to work, and Dr. Cortana is really on his case and kind of takes a little bit of his optimism away from him because he realizes all he's got is a job in a little bureaucracy, pushing papers around. Now, what's interesting about this is I'm kind of a libertarian in terms of my economics, but you can see the sort of like Marxist vibe to this world, is that people with lots of money are the people who are best able to, grease the wheels and use time travel to their advantage. Now, why is there paperwork surrounding time travel? Because if you had time travel and tried to use it, everyone would want to use it, and it could potentially cause all kinds of disasters. So I think a good in-world explanation of this would be that one of Dr. Augustine's associates had some of his notes that allowed him to use very limited time travel, and this essentially caused the Las Vegas gambling system to collapse because this immoral associate of Dr. Augustine's sold that to people who would then go back in time with information and then bet, on the winning sports teams and the winning, presidential campaigns, and they just clean out Las Vegas. So Las Vegas went bankrupt, and that helped prompt the government shutdown of any kind of time travel technology, shutdown of all the notes being distributed. And that is what convinced the government that they've got to be very careful about this. Because if you could collapse Las Vegas using knowledge from the future, you could collapse the stock market, you could collapse whole nations, you could collapse anything. So how does the government like to use time travel? Well, in addition to, maybe snuffing out enemies overseas they don't like, they use time travel to essentially eliminate waste in the economy. So that's something important, is this is a bizarrely rich world. The poverty has been eliminated. The bum on the street has a comfortable lifestyle. The millionaires of today are trillionaires then, and Dr. Augustine is a multi trillionaire. He makes $1 trillion on an afternoon because he's just continually creating new stuff and making new discoveries. But pretty much we've all become richer because we've eliminated waste. If you know a bridge is going to collapse, you will go back in time and with the information that the bridge is going to collapse, and then prevent the bridge from collapsing. So how does the government prevent people from messing up things in the time stream? Well, you have to go back. You can only go back so far, and you have to go back to a room. And as far as most people are concerned, this is the limits of time travel. They think that all time travel can accomplish is you walk into the room, a light buzzes, and you are stuck in this room. You're not allowed to go anywhere. You're not allowed to touch anything. And the explanation is if you touch something, if you stepped on a bug, you could ruin the time stream and you could destroy all life on Earth. And so they can only go back in time and then with the information they have in their head, and then relay that information to a computer. And then that information is relayed to a trusted associate. So you go back in time, you relay the information about the bridge falling down, the associate receives that information in the past, and then the government makes corrections to prevent the bridge from collapsing. And as far as Peter Parker and Dr. Cortana are concerned, that's all time travel is good for. You can't go anywhere, you can't do anything. It's very boring. Time travel is a very, very boring business, which makes millions of dollars by eliminating waste of capital. So that's the economics angle, and that could get really boring if you focus on that. So what we need is an adventure. We need something to go wrong, and I don't know what would go wrong. Maybe Dr. Cortana gets a little too greedy. Maybe Peter Parker gets a little too idealistic, but it is revealed that time travel can do much more than that. That not only can you go to any time and place in history without limitation, but you can go to any world that you can possibly conceive of without limitation. And there are no rules for Dr. Augustine is the only one who understands the theory enough to use it correctly, but there are no limitations and no rules on what he can do with time travel. He can be anywhere, He can be anywhere, anytime, for as long as he wants, and with anyone he wants. He can take a ton of stuff with him. He can take a ton of people with him. He can go just by himself. So some sort of disaster prompts Dr. Augustine into action. He's always been this sort of idealistic lover of adventure and individualism who feels crushed by the government. And so then he takes Dr. Cortana, this sort of unscrupulous assistant, and Peter Parker, the naive young idealist, on some sort of adventure across dimensions and times. And that's it. That's as far as I've gotten. I've got the setup, I've got the characters and what motivates them, but I don't exactly know what the bad thing is or what kind of crazy worlds they could go to from there. But the idea of the theme is it's a boring kind of business application view of time travel versus Dr. Augustine is a sort of Scrooge McDuck type of character where he has a thirst for adventure, and this is at long last his opportunity for adventure. And young Peter Parker kind of rising to the occasion alongside Dr. Augustine, and Dr. Cortana sort of providing, she's sort of the Han Solo of the group. She's sort of the caustic and cynical realist of the group, and Peter Parker is idealist and he loves Dr. Augustine and he just wants to go on an adventure with Dr. Augustine. And part of the problem with something like this is it's very hard to write about fields you aren't an expert in. So I'm not an expert in theoretical physics or anything, so I just kind of have to fake it to make it. But you could focus on the personality of the characters and make them really believable in that dimension without having exhaustive knowledge about, Einstein's theory of relativity. You could focus on Dr. Einstein's bitterness and his, thirst to help people and to explore. You could focus on Dr. Cortana's cynicism and greed and desire to better her own situation and just kind of shrugging her shoulders. She figures she can't change what the government thinks about time travel. And you can focus on Peter Parker's sort of young, naive, but utterly charming optimism. So that's it. That's the idea. So if any of that sparks you, then I'd say roll with it. The important premise of how time travel is used in this setup is that the government controls it. It's used for very boring purposes, but the boring purposes it's used for create tons of wealth and success for everyone. But there's no adventure and there's no excitement. of it. I had some random ideas, like Dr. Augustine got a chance to see one thing in history before the government cracked down on him, and he's very sullen and quiet about what this is. And Peter Parker might ask him, well, what was the one thing you saw, Dr. Augustine, in all of human history? And he says, my idea for it is that Dr. Augustine says, I went to Jerusalem in the year 33 AD because I wanted to witness with my own two eyes whether or not Christ was a real historical figure. And Peter Parker says, "Oh, you did that? Well, tell me. This is probably one of the most significant discoveries in all of human history." And Dr. Augustine says, "I'm not going to tell you." And he leaves it there because Dr. Augustine, even though he's very adventurous and he desires to know all of these things, that he's had this experience that has taught him that there are certain things that you shouldn't reveal or use time travel for, or else you'll strip human beings of all their sense of normalcy and purpose. So Dr. Augustine will never use the technology to show them certain things about our history. He will never go back in time and kill Hitler. He will never go back in time and try to save Abraham Lincoln. Well, actually, he would be willing to do that because he believes that because there are multiple universes, you can do anything and it won't matter. It won't affect Universe Prime. That's part of what frustrates Dr. Augustine is he believes you can do anything you want in time and not hurt anything. And the government is terrified that if you do anything with time travel, apart from just passing along messages, essentially, you could theoretically destroy the world. So, that was a little contradictory. It's still kind of in its hazy stages, but if anything sparked you, this is open source, yo. And if you do anything with that idea, do show me. It's public domain. You can make it. You can sell it. You can make money off of this generic idea. I'm not gonna change my mind. All right, you've got me on record. This is public domain. You have my express permission to tell stories based on this idea. But please do show me what you make if this prompts you or sparks your imagination to make anything. All right, I'm #1 Marmaduke fan. I love you guys, and I'll catch you later.